question of the week.
But it's less of a question and more of an opinion.
Yes, question of the week from Drink More Bourbon on YouTube on a previous episode. The 10 questions you shouldn't ask when buying a car episode.
That was a good episode, that one.
That was a good episode.
He didn't think so.
No,
doggone.
he disagrees. Respectfully, actually. So
Yes,
it starts out.
He has some good points, so let's get into that, and I'll pick them apart.
Doug is feeling feisty tonight. All right. Now I'm speaking as Drink More Bourbon here. I respectfully disagree on the number of owners piece. For luxury or high-performance cars, no, it generally does not matter how many owners a car has had because of the enthusiast element. But for someone looking to buy an average daily driver, it absolutely matters. It's just math. The more owners a, quote, regular car has, the more likely it is going to be to fall into the hands of someone who didn't take care of it properly. And all it takes is one bad owner to severely cripple the longevity or appearance of a car. When you're dealing with more owners, you are relying on every single one of them doing their due diligence and proper maintenance on the car. That is just not statistically probable, the more people you involve. I know you're a dealer speaking mostly to higher-end vehicles, but if you're looking to buy a used Camry or Accord and two have a similar year in mileage, but the first had 4 or 5 owners and the other has 1 or 2, I guarantee you the fewer owned one is going to be in better condition overall, way more often than not. I think that needed to be clarified.
Okay, let's take these in reverse order. I think they're valid opinions. However, his closing statement of that he guarantees that a car with more owners will be in better condition than fewer owners the majority of the time is just statistically wrong. And that's why I came up with the kind of guide of it doesn't matter how many owners a car has had. It's not because of an opinion. It's something I noticed and kept noticing over and over and over again, that I find zero correlation between condition and number of owners. It isn't there. And I'll kind of backtrack through some of his reasoning to explain why. So, he said you're relying on all owners to keep up to date with maintenance, and that's actually not true. The more transactions a car has, in theory, but in practice as well, every transaction, the dealers will bring it up to spec on maintenance. So if you have one bad owner that doesn't do the maintenance, well, they sell it. The dealer's going to bring it up to maintenance. Most of the time. Not all dealers are like that, but most of them do, because they have to sell a car that's roadworthy. And if you get one bad owner and then a really good owner, the really good owner is going to do everything that the last owner didn't. So a lack of maintenance for a short period of time does not hurt a car, unless they run it off a cliff or something. It's no big deal. The other thing that he theorized was that more owners means a higher likelihood that someone didn't care for it. That's probably true. But again, you have one person that didn't care for it, versus if you have 1 or 2 owners, if one of those didn't care for it, they didn't care for it for a really long period of time. So if you have a car with 6 owners and one of them sucked, the other 5 took great care of it, they essentially negated anything that bad owner did, right? You can't necessarily harm a vehicle by neglecting maintenance, right? The spark plugs are a little bit old, the tires are worn out, whatever. Maybe they didn't change the oil, unless they're not warming their car up and then redlining it. Doesn't matter that much, right? You're not going to kill the engine by going a little bit over on your oil change. But I've seen cars that have one owner, and that one owner was terrible. And I'm like, when one owner owns it for a long period of time and neglects it, then you have issues. So again, this is all going back to what I've seen fleshed out over and over and over again in practice. Those, the points he brings up are valid in theory, but they don't hold true in practice. And I think it's the same with a regular car or a high-end car, right? Cars are cars. They're machines. So, yeah, that's good points. But he's wrong.
Well, I think that's such a common misnomer because I remember when I was shopping for a car, that was something that I was told that I really need to look for. It was, you don't want a ton of owners, can't have that. And I think the only time that where Drink More Bourbon's comments really make sense is if you are buying private party from someone who has owned it for a long time and hasn't maintained it. So you need to do some due diligence, get an inspection, know what you're looking for, have somebody who knows it. But unless you're in that very specific situation, to your point, somebody has probably reversed course on the neglect that has happened.
Right. And even a single owner that has maintained it doesn't mean they maintained it the proper way, right? I've seen crazy situations where somebody has all these service records and they serviced it at the best shop on the planet and they're dropping the shop's name. And I call the shop and they go, yeah, we don't like that guy. Like, yes, he serviced it, but we told him he needed $10K worth of work and he did 3. So he's got all these receipts from us and he's dropping our name because we're the best shop on the planet as if that gives some warranty of fitness for this car. But he actually declined all the stuff that we told him he needed to do and only did the bare minimum. So it gets dicey. So... And that's why sometimes a multiple owner car is good, because then you have this control alt delete type thing where it's like, well, you had this one guy that did the bare minimum, but then it goes through a dealership that said, okay, we need to do all this stuff. And I mean, case in point, I just sold a 9-owner GT3 to a guy and he took it to this amazing shop in Denver. It's been maintained. We have limited records, but the car was fantastic. They picked the friggin' car apart and they're like, well, we don't have a record of this last fluid change or that fluid change or that fluid change or whatever. All that stuff is up to date, but just because they didn't have a record of it, they're like, we're going to make you do all of it. So he's going to spend like $5 or $10 bringing it quote unquote up to date on maintenance, even though it doesn't really need anything. And now is the average Nissan owner going to do that? Not necessarily, but that's just another point where multiple owners feeds into, hey, this car is going to be maintained because someone along the line is going to, reset things and go, we're going to bring everything up to date. Or like the Acura NSX I sold one time, that the previous owner had done a timing belt and water pump change, which is the thing you have to do on NSXs, right? It's just, but he had used the eBay water pump and stuff, and he had done a reseal of the engine, but it was all leaky. So we had it done again with the proper OE stuff. And then we sold it to somebody. They traded it into a dealer. It went to another guy that we ended up connecting with randomly 3 years after he owned it. And he never got the receipts from what we did. And we did a full engine out reseal, timing belt, water pump. So that was the second one in 2 years. And he didn't have receipts, so he did it again just as preventive maintenance. So this car that had gone through 4 different owners in a couple of years had 3 timing belt and water pump services, right? So it was so over-serviced because every owner wanted to make sure it was great.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas if that one guy that worked on it himself had kept it, it would have been leaking like a sieve, and the timing belt probably would have failed because it was a cheap eBay one. But he would have said, well, I'm one owner. I've maintained it, and I've got all my receipts, and I worked on it myself. And the normal private party would be like, yeah, I want to buy my car from that guy. No, you don't.
So at what point does it become cause for concern? Like we've talked about this on the podcast before. I remember you and I were looking at a Z3 from some corner lot dealership somewhere 2 years ago, and it had changed hands however many times in the past 2 years, or the Miata that we saw at the Block a Chip car show, where it's changed hands so frequently. So what's the point where it may behoove you to raise an eyebrow at that? Is it dependent on the frequency in which it changes hands? Is that the big factor there?
That can be, yes. I think the reason most people are concerned about multiple owner scenarios because they're looking at a hot potato type thing. And that's a very real concern, right, is if you have a lot of transactions frequently, especially that include wholesale auctions, because even dealers realize they want to get off of it. Again, just because a car goes through a wholesale auction doesn't mean it's bad. But if you have kind of a bunch of these caution flags all converging, and you have a bunch of owners in a short period of time, dealers, wholesale auctions, and you go, it seems like everybody was trying to get off of this car, then that's when it really warrants further investigation. Again, that doesn't mean anything. That could be totally explainable, but that's when you really want to look into it and go, without more information, this is a big yellow flag.